Crowd scene.
Hi everybody, we're going to try something a bit different with this episode. Split into two shorter parts, this episode is focused on our guest's intriguing concept and the story of how their idea came to be, what it is, its inspirations and aspirations. The following episode, out next week on Wednesday, will concentrate on the crowdfunding itself, what exactly our guests learned as they ran their campaign. What would they recommend to take your idea and transform it into something you can share with the world? So for the complete picture, do give both episodes a listen. And with that in mind, let's get on with part one.
Crowd scene. Gonna kick it with Pete and Mike. Crowd scene. Interviews behind the hype. Crowd scene.
Hi there.
Hello.
Welcome to Crowd Scene, the show about successful crowdfunding campaigns and the people who make them happen. I'm Michael Ogden.
And I'm Peter Dean.
In each episode of Crowd Scene, we speak with people who've taken a risk by turning an idea of theirs into reality, by raising money on a crowdfunding platform. But what did it take to reach their goal? I like to hear the story behind the idea and discover what it meant for them to find success.
And I'm interested in how you design and plan a successful campaign, as well as what our guests have learned along the way. We'll talk about some of the factors that can make or break a campaign.
In this episode, we're joined by Ilya Rosenberg and Aaron Zarraga, co-founders of Sensel and inventors of the Morph. Ilya and Aaron believe the Sensel Morph will pave the way for a new generation of tactile and responsive interfaces. Interfaces that will entirely replace the keyboard and the mouse, and in doing so, transform the making of art, music, and gaming.
That's right. In fact, Wired magazine says the Sensel Morph may be the future of input devices, and TechCrunch calls their invention a keyboard on steroids. So what is it? It's an iPad-sized touchpad that senses pressure and can track anything from faint brushstrokes to a hard drumbeat. To turn their concept into reality, they looked to crowdfunding in order to raise $60,000 over the course of a 45-day campaign. They attracted more than 1,600 backers and blew way past their initial target to raise a staggering $442,648.
So Ilya and Aaron will be sharing their insights and crowdfunding advice throughout the show, but first, let's hear their story. Ilya and Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys.
Congratulations on a ridiculously successful campaign.
Thank you so much.
Ilya and Aaron, can you tell us what the Sensel Morph is and explain what it does that the mouse and keyboard cannot?
Yeah, so the Sensel Morph is it's kind of a next generation of input devices, is how we like to describe it. It's basically it's a giant touch sensitive surface, and it's covered by 20,000 force sensitive elements, and each one basically is able to sense pressure, and so we can detect basically anything that touches the surface, whether it's your fingers, a paintbrush. You can put a mug on it and we'll pick that up. And what's really unique about that is we're able to put different tactile surfaces over the Morph and sense through those surfaces. So that allows us, and that's where the name Morph comes from, is basically allows us to morph the input surface into any kind of input device you want, basically.
So I imagine this is kind of an increasingly competitive field. Is there something that, how do you stay distinctive in that competition?
Well, we're really the first device that's, that can kind of become anything. It's incredibly versatile. So there's, in this area, there's been a lot of like very single purpose devices, right? Like if your keyboard is a keyboard and that's all it's going to be from the time you buy it to the time you throw it out. Mm-hmm. There's DJ input devices, there's drawing tablets, and so there's this whole array of very specialized input devices. This is kind of the first input device that can do it all, and that's what makes it really unique.
So I like the way you say your keyboard until you throw it out. Spoken like a true entrepreneur. Just wondering, is the Sensel Morph something that is going to replace the keyboard and mouse, or do you think it's going to be used alongside the keyboard and mouse?
We imagine long term that it could basically replace the keyboard in your laptop, and why have a single purpose input device that's covering this whole second surface of your laptop when it could be something that's really versatile and can do a lot of different things. People today, they don't use their computer just for typing. So why is it that whole surface is, that's really all it's good for?
In your video, you've got, in your campaign video for the Kickstarter, you've got artists and musicians using the Sensel Morph. Are they the primary audience?
They're the audience that kind of latched on to the idea the most when we started showing this. Before we launched our campaign, we started going out and showing, just showing the device to different potential users and getting their feedback. And we got a very strong response from artists and musicians because they already understand the value of pressure in their interactions. And they're always looking for new ways to do creative work. And the Morph sort of opens up a lot of new possibilities.
I suppose, is it in the family of kind of like a Wacom drawing tablet?
So it was interesting with the artists.
Mm-hmm.
We thought that was going to be their primary use case. So that's one of the key things we learned and kind of going out and talking to people. We thought, hey, they're going to want to be able to use a stylus, and they're going to want to have all the little buttons on the stylus, and kind of like we were thinking, oh, like how do we get those features for our device? And then in talking to a lot of the artists, we found out that it really wasn't what they wanted. It's just that's what they've been forced to do because that's been the only input device out there, kind of targeting artists. We found out that they were actually really excited about using more traditional tools like paintbrushes and, all the different tools they have in their studio. We were working with this artist, John Casey, who's a caricaturist, and we went into his studio and he picked up, just brushes from his studio and started drawing on a Morph. And that was kind of a revelation to us because a lot of artists are trained with those kind of more classic tools, and they don't get to use them in their working life many times. So
I'd like to get a sense of, in terms of your background, how did you two meet, and what is it that you each bring to the table? How do you work together?
My background is I'm originally a software guy. I do a lot of work with computer graphics and did some work in the video game industry. Did some things with simulation. And the one thing I kept coming back to, kept noticing in my work was that a lot of times it was the input that was a limiting factor in the experiences that I wanted to build, through software. So I got super interested in input. And I actually had a previous startup that was also trying to develop novel input devices way back in 2010. That startup got bought up. And so then I went to work at Amazon in their consumer electronics group, and it was a really fascinating group. We did a lot of concept devices, kind of taking ideas all the way from a prototype to handing it over to a product group to turn into a real product, and that's where I met Aaron, that group.
Yeah, my background is I studied electrical engineering in school, so on paper I'm like a hardware guy, but I do a lot of software. So kind of like the opposite of Ilya. Ilya on paper is a software guy that does a lot of hardware, and so I met Ilya at Amazon. We worked on a lot of different projects together. A lot of them that were kind of really exciting, and we got to ship a few of the concepts that we worked on in our group. And so we just had a really great working relationship, and our skills complement each other a lot. Like there is some overlap, but when we start a new project, we kind of automatically know how to split up the tasks because I know what Ilya is good at and he knows what I'm good at. So there's not a whole lot of discussion. We can just go and really execute on a project.
And did you both leave Amazon to start Sensel Morph?
I left earlier. I actually left to finish my PhD. I also, we had a baby, so I took some time off. And
not Ilya and his wife.
Yeah. It's probably best to clarify that. Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
And so, I was taking some time off, and I started kind of thinking back to some of the ideas I had way back when I was in grad school and things I wanted to do that kind of never got around to doing because, once you're working a full-time job, it's kind of hard to kind of explore some of these more creative ideas, and just started coming up with new ways to build sensors and started prototyping them at home. And it kind of hit upon this one approach that I actually didn't think was going to work. It was just like, I might as well try this idea. Just maybe I'll learn something. And then it worked incredibly well.
And can you
And that's
describe that?
around-
I mean, in terms of prototyping for sensors, are you doing this is this on paper? Are you programming, or what kind of prototype do you need to make in order to see some promise?
I mean, I was actually like designing. I got some PCB layout software and started just basically designing circuits. Had a couple of them manufactured, kind of at a local PCB house. So it was real. It's hard, with hardware. It's hard to just do it on paper and know what you're gonna get. So a lot of times you just have to build it and see.
And was the Morph created in any way out of a sense of frustration that you felt that you couldn't, do the work you needed to do with existing technology?
Yeah, there was definitely a sense of frustration, and kind of just a sense that, a lot like where the consumer electronics industry was going with input was really not taking into account, what we as humans are capable of. Like most of our devices aren't really built with that in mind. A lot of times they're just built with, what's easier to manufacture or what's lower cost. So a lot of times those things take priority over the experience. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to change that.
We're really excited about getting our product in people's hands, because one thing, I'm glad that we were able to get a lot of the points of the product across in the video. Mm-hmm. But one of the really magical things about the Sensel Morph is actually interacting with it. We've had the pleasure of taking the Morph to a few conferences, like we were at SIGGRAPH a few months ago, and just the reaction people have when they try it out is just incredible, because a lot of people haven't never experienced anything like that, where the computer is kind of reading an analog input from you, and a lot of people have a really cool experience with it. And so for me, it's kind of telling that that's how I originally came on board, is just by trying the sensor myself. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people, when they see the Morph in the in other people's hands, or when they see it out in the market, they're going to get really excited about it as well.
Well, can you explain what force touch means? I mean, that's pressure?
Yeah. So basically right now, most touch screens, they all sense capacitance. So they sense electrical properties in your fingers. They actually are sensing the moisture in your fingertips. That's why, like on a really dry day, sometimes your touch screen isn't as responsive, or when you're sweaty, the touch screen kind of changes behavior. And so when you sense moisture, all you can really tell is the position of the touch. You get an XY location. And so when you think about a human finger, there's so much nuance there in terms of how hard you're pressing, the shape of the contact that's coming down. There's a lot of intent in those motions that humans have. And it's kind of unfair to boil that down to an XY position. And so with our pressure grid technology, we're sensing pressure directly. So that's why you can interact with your fingers. And when you do interact with the finger, we can tell the XY position, but we can also tell how hard it's pressing. We get a really high resolution image of the shape of the contact as well. So we can tell a finger versus a palm versus, like the side of your knuckles and things like that. And then because we sense pressure, we can also sense any object that exerts a force. So that's why our technology can sense paintbrushes. We can sense pens, pencils, like Ilya mentioned, coffee mugs. And it really opens up the way that you can interact with the sensor.
That's an interesting word that you used, intent. I mean, I wonder even if you can at some point begin to kind of determine psychological, whether people are convinced about making a choice or not. Just a thought.
Oh, absolutely. Even for keyboard, what's fascinating, when you type on an iPad, it's very uncomfortable because you have to hover type. Right. And there's really no distinction in terms of the degree of intent. If you brush your hand accidentally against the sensor, the sensor just sees on and it says you're trying to touch here. Where with our keyboard overlay, whenever you touch the sensor, we're detecting that touch the entire time. But we can look at the level of pressure that you're using and also like kind of the velocity of like how hard you're hitting it. And so we can tell, the user is just resting their hands on the keyboard. What's cool is we can track your hands before you ever even hit a key. So as soon as you come in contact, we see your hands, and then we distinguish that from like intentionally hitting a key. And so even that allows users to comfortably rest their hands on the sensor while using it. And so it's just a very different experience from what people are used to with touchscreens.
So how sensitive is the Sensel Morph? What's the lightest possible touch that would register something?
We basically tuned it so that it's extremely, extremely sensitive.
So if I dropped a feather on it, would that activate it?
If you, maybe not if you dropped it, but if you held a feather and you kind of pushed on it, we'd probably see something in the force image there.
I've tried that and it works.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We did try the right count on the street. So I don't know. Aaron was kind of grossed out by it. He was like, "Don't touch the sensor with that feather."
It's like a real feather.
Like roadkill.
You don't know where that feather came from.
Yeah. And what about the other way? Is there any kind of maximum force that you can exert on it without it breaking?
Yeah, we made it so you can basically go up to several kilograms. So we tuned the solution so that you can basically touch as light as you can touch, and we can sense it, and then it captures up to where your hands kind of start to hurt when you press on it. Like when you're mashing on it like as hard as you can. That's kind of where our sensor maxes out. So it's tuned for that type of interaction.
I love it when Americans talk about kilograms. That really makes me smile.
You feel like you're winning some kind of battle.
Yeah, I think so.
The war.
Finally.
You mentioned the iPad. I mean, so a company like Apple, are they competitors for you or potential collaborators?
I think they could be, definitely potential collaborators. I mean, if you look at the Sensel Morph, we're not trying to replace the tablet, right? Mm-hmm. What we're addressing with the Morph is kind of this convergence of laptops and tablets. Mm-hmm. Tablets are frequently now getting keyboard accessories. Like the iPad Pro actually has a keyboard that you can snap onto it to kind of turn it into a laptop. And then laptops are all getting touchscreens, and a lot of laptops now have detachable keyboards. So I think we're seeing a convergence of the two, and I think computers of the future are going to basically be some touchscreen coupled with some tactile interface. And so the kind of the trend that we saw, though, is that even though touchscreens are becoming more and more commonplace, the tactile interface is not going away because humans, are just way more efficient, and it's more comfortable to interact with the surface that's tactile and that you can feel and you can, interact with. And so the Sensel Morph is really our proposal of what that tactile interface should be or, could be. Why have, as Ilya mentioned, why have a fixed physical, interface when you can have an interface that's upgradable and changeable. And so we really see our technology as being a complement to a lot of the existing products out there.
I think it'd be useful if you explained how it was interchangeable, the tactile overlays, because it's quite cool.
Yeah, we basically developed this system where you can you snap on. There's a tactile overlay, and it's flexible, and so that allows us to sense forces through the overlay.
So it's like a rubber mat, is that right? A rubber mat that's a piano, or a rubber mat that's a drum kit.
Exactly. It's what's nice. The overlay is just a piece of silicone, or it's a piece of plastic, depending on what which overlay it is. And so there's no electronics in it, so we can make them really cost effective. And you just magnetically snap it on top of the sensor, and then the Morph auto detects what it is, so it just changes modes automatically without the user having to think about mode switches or things like that.
Now, if Pete wanted to make his own overlay, is that possible?
Yeah, we're exploring different. We're looking at different processes right now that allow users to easily make one-offs. And so, kind of the vision, longer term of the product is that we're providing an initial set of overlays that are going to allow people to get up and running with the product. But we really want to enable people to easily make one-off, say, oh, I like this keyboard, but I actually really want to move the keys around so that it's better shaped to my hands and I can make an ergonomic keyboard. And so I can just use an editor and edit the overlay and then kind of order a custom one from Sensel, and it comes in the mail and it's ready. And then we also want people to publish their designs so others can see. So if a musician makes a really interesting new instrument, we want him to be able to share that with the community. And so you can kind of think of the Morph as enabling an app store for physical interfaces.
I think that's a really, really cool thing about the Morph. So look, before we get to talking about crowdfunding, I just want to ask you about the name Sensel Morph. Who came up with those names, and were there any alternatives?
Ilya, you should answer that one.
I think there was a lot of alternatives as we went through. I think for both the company name for Sensel and for the Morph, we went through many dozens, if not 100, different names. The name Sensel is it's actually a real word that's not very commonly used, but it's very similar to pixel, and it means sensor element. And it kind of represents what we're about as a company, is
So
making.
How would you use Sensel in a sentence?
Wow, that sensor has a lot of sensels.
So come on, let us in on some of the alternative names that didn't quite make it through for the Morph.
I remember one of them was we just thought about calling it Product One. That was before we had any super compelling names. We're like, well, it's our first product, so that kind of describes it.
Very logical, yeah.
And then I think we considered also calling it the Magic Pad at some point, because we realized because the acronym MAGIC could stand for like music, art, gaming, interaction, and stuff like that.
It's a bit Steve Jobs, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a little too much. So.
So let's talk crowdfunding. Why did you guys decide to crowdfund this?
So basically, one of the things we felt about this product is it's not a product where we want to make something and kind of force it upon people. It's a device where we want to get a community of users around it and shape the evolution, the development of the product around kind of feedback from the users. And so we thought, what better place to find a great community of early adopters that are like super excited and passionate about technology than the Kickstarter community.
And had either of you crowdfunded anything before?
No, it was the first time for both of us.
So how did Ilya and Aaron prepare for their crowdfunding adventure, and what tips do they have for those of you who want to run your own campaign? Well, we hear that and more in part 2 as we conclude our conversation with the Sensel Morph team next week.
Through all those conversations with people that have done Kickstarters, we realized that we were just completely not ready for the Kickstarter.
Crowd Scene is published on Wednesdays, so tune in then and be sure and check out all of our episodes with a variety of crowdfunders, from songwriters to filmmakers, inventors, and entrepreneurs. They're all for free on iTunes or any of your favorite podcast apps. Thanks for listening.
Crowd Scene, gonna kick it with Pete and Mike. Crowd Scene, interviews behind the hype. Crowd Scene, Crowd Scene. What do you do? What do you say to make crowdfunding go your way? Crowd Scene, Crowd Scene. Crowd Scene, Crowd Scene, Crowd Scene. Your shake brings all the backers to the yard.
Now that's what I call epic.